Welcome to Whoops, I Solve Another One. Episode 1. Not all laundry is clothes-related. Written by Sak Padua. Son, I am so proud of you. Those were the words Detective Carlos Sandoval told his son during his elementary school graduation. A young marshal, beaming with pride, stood before his father, saluting him. Carlos, hours late but smiling wide, returned the gesture. That moment had stayed with Marshall. For a long time, his family believed he'd follow in his father's footsteps, becoming a lawyer, an officer, maybe even a detective. But Marshall had other plans. He wasn't here to uphold the law. He was here to tell the story. In present day, inside Marshall's office, a news publication and media office, Marshall strutted across his small, cluttered office, humming to himself. Meanwhile, Douglas sat at his desk, pinching the bridge of his nose as he dealt with a phone call. Finally, he exhaled in frustration. I'm still dealing with your mess. Can you, for once, do your job cleanly? They're accusing you of defamation. Marshall paused mid-step, raising an eyebrow. Who's accusing me? Douglas didn't get a chance to answer. Marshall, already reading his expression, smirked. Wait, is this about the laundry shop guy? The one who turned my clothes into modern art? Douglas scowled. Damn right. They're threatening to sue us if you don't take that article down. Marshall waved a hand dismissively. Relax. I'll send them a very sweet, very apologetic email. Problem solved. Douglas wasn't convinced. Later that day, Marshall and Douglas were laughing at their desks when the office door suddenly swung open. Detective Aria Miller stood at the entrance, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. A classic, you screwed up look. Marshall let out a dramatic sigh. Detective Miller, what a pleasure. To what do we owe the honor? Need me to boost your credentials with some glowing press coverage? Aria smirked. No thanks, small-timer. Just do your job properly for once. Then, turning to Douglas, she added, Douglas, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Douglas blinked, confused. Wait, what do you mean? Douglas shot a sharp glance at Marshall. What did you do? Marshall hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Okay, so about that sweet, apologetic email. I, may have forgotten to change the signature. Silence. Marshall gave an awkward thumbs up. Technically, you sent it. Aria shook her head. The laundry shop owner was so moved by your apology that he called the police to have you arrested. Douglas slammed his hands on the desk. Marshall. Marshall sighed, already bracing for the incoming explosion. Geez, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to blackmail them. That wasn't the intent. I was just offering a positive review for a price. That's just business, not blackmail. Marshall's confident defense left the room in stunned silence. But that's exactly what Marshall wanted. Inside the police station, with all eyes on the complainant, Marshall knew he had them right where he wanted. The laundromat owner scowled at him with pure disdain. Douglas, meanwhile, noticed something strange, the small shift in Marshall's expression. His eyebrows twitched, his smirk changed. Douglas recognized that look. Marshall was up to something. Aria glanced between Marshall and the laundromat owner. Then she saw it, Marshall's villainous smile. Marshall clapped his hands together, beaming. All right, fine. I'll admit it. I charged you for a good review. But let's be honest, that's not why we're here, is it? Aria, Chief Stanley, and Douglas all turned to look at him. The laundromat owner stiffened. What the hell are you talking about? Marshall tilted his head. Funny thing is, I've been using your shop for weeks. Not exactly a booming business, huh? Barely any customers walking in. And yet, he gestured at the man's expensive watch. You seem to have a crazy amount of money. Aria and Chief Stanley exchanged looks, suddenly intrigued. Marshall grinned and casually called Douglas over. He wrapped an arm around the laundromat owner and whispered dramatically, "Let me guess. Your other customers don't come in for dry cleaning, do they? No? Laundry? No?" He paused, then snapped his fingers. Eureka! Money laundering. Douglas blinked. Dude, laundering doesn't always mean laundry when it involves money. Wait. His eyes widened as he turned to the owner. Oh, hell no. You? Marshall smirked. Bingo. The laundromat owner started fidgeting. His complexion paled. Marshall casually reached into his jacket and pulled out a red envelope. Slowly, deliberately, he began opening it, drawing all eyes toward him. Inside, folded financial documents spilled out. Marshall flattened them against the table and casually skimmed them. Financial records. Weird numbers. So, I checked the business registry. He looked up, his grin widening. Turns out your laundromat is also listed under a fake shipping company. Pretty sloppy for a front, don't you think? Silence. The laundromat owner swallowed hard. I can explain. Chief Stanley and Aria locked eyes. A petty complaint had just turned into a financial crime investigation. Aria straightened, her professional tone kicking in. Full business records check. Now. The laundromat owner's panic grew as officers moved in. His eyes darted back to Marshall, who, of course, was still smiling. Realizing Marshall wasn't done yet, the man finally broke. All right. Just stop talking. Marshall leaned back, triumphant. Case closed. Afterward, Aria, Marshall, and Douglas stood in the police station lobby, drinking coffee. Marshall took a sip, completely at ease. See? I didn't blackmail anyone. I just happened to mention my review price, and he freaked out. Kinda suspicious, don't you think? Douglas shook his head. I can't believe you tricked them into confessing. Inside a freaking police station. Marshall grinned proudly. That was the final straw for Aria. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and muttered, I swear, one day, I'm going to strangle you. Then, she snapped, Marshall, get out. Marshall sighed dramatically, adjusting his collar. Fine, but just so you know, you'll miss me when I'm gone. Aria folded her arms. Out. Douglas smirked, giving Marshall a nudge toward the door. Move before she arrests you. And with that, Marshall strolled out, still grinning. On their way back to the office that evening, Marshall spotted something that caught his attention. Dude, check that out. Halloween's coming. Huh? That place looks seriously creepy. He pointed at an old shop building, now transformed into a haunted house attraction. A long line wrapped around the entrance, filled with excited visitors. Douglas smirked. I bet you won't set foot inside. Marshall scoffed. Oh yeah? Let's go. Stop the car. Amused, Douglas parked the car, and the two headed toward the haunted house. Once inside, Marshall quickly sensed an opportunity. This place is packed. Good scoop for us, he muttered. He glanced at the ticket booth, spotting a bored-looking attendant. Flashing his usual charming grin, he strolled up. Within seconds of his sweet talking, she sighed and waved them through. Dude, you just finessed free entry to a haunted house, Douglas whispered. It's called investigative journalism, Marshall replied smugly. As they walked in, they noticed the crowd was diverse, not just kids, but also older folks. Huh, Even the older generation loves this. Smart marketing, Marshall observed. Douglas nodded. Feels like one of those generational places. Their conversation cut off instantly when the first jump scare hit. We are never talking about this, Douglas wheezed. Agreed, Marshall panted. As they pressed forward, they stumbled from one scare to another, each time laughing before immediately screaming again. Then, they saw her. A woman knelt in the corner, weeping softly. Her long hair covered her face, her body trembling. Dude, there's another customer? Douglas asked. Marshall narrowed his eyes. He had a bad feeling about this. Yeah, go check on her, he said, smirking. Douglas sighed and cautiously approached. Hey, you okay? No response. Slowly, he reached out and touched her shoulder. The moment he did, cold, ice cold. Then, a deep thunderclap roared through the haunted house. Where is my mommy? The woman whimpered. Douglas barely had time to react before her head slowly turned, revealing an eyeless face and an unnaturally wide smile. Douglas screamed and jumped back. Then, Marshall saw the shadow above them. His stomach dropped. Slowly, he looked up. A tall, thin woman was crawling along the ceiling, her limbs twisting unnaturally as she inched closer. Oh no, Marshall whispered. The woman tilted her head toward them. There she is, the kneeling woman whispered. Marshall and Douglas screamed and ran for their lives. Bursting through a curtain, they found themselves in a calm, dimly lit room. Panting, Douglas bent over his knees. Dude, that was insane. Tell me about it. That open-world jump scare crap? Never again, Marshall groaned. Also, you totally stopped recording. Like hell I was going to hold a camera through that. They laughed weakly, finally regaining their composure. Then, bang. A lifeless body dropped from the ceiling, landing in front of them with a sickening thud. Marshall and Douglas both jumped back, shrieking. Nope, I'm done, Douglas shouted. But then, Marshall froze. Something was off. A pool of liquid started spreading beneath the figure. Marshall's breath hitched. Wait, this is way too realistic. Douglas frowned. It's just a prop, man. These places have insane effects. Marshall knelt down hesitantly and reached out. His fingers brushed against warm skin. He stiffened. Slowly, his eyes trailed up the body, taking in the details, the lifeless eyes, the gaping wound, the unnatural angle of the limbs. He swallowed hard. Douglas, this jump scare looks a little too real to me. Silence. Then, realization hit. They weren't in the haunted house anymore. They were at a crime scene. End of first episode. Coming up soon. Episode 2. That jump scare looks too real. See you on the next episode.